Pleasure, 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 pleasure. That's all Jeffrey indulges in. But one day, young Jeffrey vows to get his life back on track. He goes onto Amazon.com and he orders some weights. I'm gonna get ripped and work out every day. Jeffrey tears the box open and starts doing some curls. Something doesn't feel right. This is so hard, it hurts, it burns. No, I'm probably doing it wrong, so I'll just go research how to do it right. He goes back to playing video games. Pleasure, 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 pleasure. Adonis is the most disciplined man, but he also has a healthy serving of motivation inside of him. How? How is Adonis so motivated to do these extremely hard feats? Well, it all comes down to how much pain he will tolerate. I'm not gonna waste your time. This is exactly how you can get more motivated within literally the next few minutes. Go and experience more pain first. Do this by doing something uncomfortable. For me, I get a huge level of discomfort through cold. So I'll go and take either a cold shower or if I really wanna go more extreme, an ice bath. And that literally, it's painful and it hurts. And usually we wanna run away from pain. But when you decide to actively pursue pain and just experience the discomfort, straight afterwards, after that ice bath, after that sauna, after that hard workout, you feel incredible. I'm not a scientist, but I'm going to try and explain what I've learned from Dr. Andrew Huberman on his podcast about motivation and also about dopamine. So it seems like the scientists around the world have understood now that motivation, this feeling that we want to go and do something. You know, motivation is like if you feel motivated to go to the gym. What does that mean? Well, I want to go to the gym. If you feel motivated to play video games, what does it mean? I would like to go play video games. It's just like something you want to do, right? It's desire. It's the thing you want to go and do. And you may believe that motivation isn't really important and that discipline is what we need. I highly agree that we need discipline, but I still think motivation is extremely valuable because to be disciplined is when you don't have motivation to go and do something, but you do it anyway, and you need that to become successful in anything you want to do. But if you can feel motivated, that thing just becomes more enjoyable to begin with. Motivation is simply the normal person's word for what scientists would call dopamine. And dopamine is, I don't know, it's a molecule or chemical or hormone inside of us, right? It's one of those things inside of us, right? And it's just released at different times. And if you understand dopamine, you'll understand motivation and you won't ever struggle to be motivated for something again. And I will say again, that's extremely valuable because everyone likes to be in this like Sigma male grind set, like, yeah, discipline over motivation. Motivation's a myth. Motivation's not even important. Oh, okay. So when you've got that hard thing coming up, would you rather be the guy who feels awesome to go and do that thing? Or would you want to be the guy who just thinks, oh man, I really don't want to, but I guess I'll have to then? Because discipline's awesome, but if you can feel like you want to do the thing, that's even better. Dopamine is like a hormone inside of us that we used to think is released upon pleasure. So we used to think that, a high dopamine activity was porn or video games. We used to think that, right? But not exactly. Dopamine isn't released on pleasure. It's released on the pursuit to pleasure. So if here is the thing that we think that we want to do, like for example, go and watch porn and fap. Actually, not that much dopamine is released when we fap, especially when you get to that end point. All of it is actually released on the pursuit to that, to drive you towards that goal, which is motivation. So try and remember that dopamine is not simply about pleasure, it's about the pursuit to pleasure. And how it works is so interesting because once you understand this thing I'm about to say, you'll change your habits through the day. How dopamine also seems to work is that when you've had a big rise in dopamine, that you've been pursuing something, whether it's, a bad habit like video games or porn, or it's even something good, like for example, going to the gym and hitting like a personal best on the bench press. When dopamine goes up, it must come down, and it does not go back down to the baseline. It goes down below that. So what this means, which has been proven by scientists, is that there is a pain and pleasure, yin and yang kind of way that our body and mind operates. So in other words, the more pleasure that you experience, the more pain that you will experience. And also similarly, if you experience pain, some kind of pain, which I'll clarify soon, you will experience more pleasure, more motivation. So perhaps the reason why we're all so demotivated these days, we don't feel like studying, or we don't feel like eating clean, or we don't feel like going to the gym. A lot of young guys have this problem. What if that's just because we're down here in dopamine, because we've just had too much pleasure with porn, video games, junk food, everything, comforts, and then it has to go down and down and down and down and down, and now you're here. And when we're down here, since we don't really understand how this stuff works, we keep trying to have more pleasure because we don't really feel motivated to go to the gym or to study, so we may as well play more video games. A little bit more pleasure, and then even down further and further and further. I don't think any scientists have really said said this, but to me that this kind of sounds like the cause of depression. What if the cause of depression, this huge lack of motivation, this huge lack of pleasure in the world, of this feeling of like grey, dull, nihilism, of darkness and dryness inside of you, what if that's just because we just had too much pleasure previously and now we just feel like we just don't feel anything these days? So what if we reverse this? Because remember, it's this kind of motion, right? What if we voluntarily decide to experience something bad and we go down? Well, then it's been proven by these scientists that when you do something that is quite painful voluntarily, your dopamine will shoot back up. The greatest thing that has been researched so far, from my understanding from Andrew Huberman's podcast, is ice baths. Ice baths have been shown to increase dopamine by 400%, 4 times. But of course, they're not easy. You have to make it relevantly cold to your own standards. So for me personally, if I get even a little bit cold, it's actually quite painful for me compared to my friend Sam. He's white skinned, I'm brown skinned, so maybe that's got something to do with it. He can handle cold a lot better than I can. I can handle heat in the sauna a lot better than he can. So he's probably actually releasing more dopamine when me and Sam go to the sauna together, because it's easier for me and it's a lot harder for him. And I'm probably releasing a lot more dopamine because even a cool bath really is painful for me. We made a cold one a few days ago with literally no ice. It was just cold water. And that was like a huge challenge for me. And Sam's saying like, bro, it's not even cold, what are you on about? And I was literally there like having to like sing and rap to like distract myself. And I was following Andrew Huberman's protocol, moving around and stuff. And it was deeply painful for me. And then I felt amazing afterwards. I think the secret to motivation is that simple. Ask yourself this question and be totally honest. How much pleasure have you indulged in the last 6 months? Whether it's the kind of food you eat, the drugs you take, the people you spend time with, what you do with those people, the stuff you consume on the internet, whether it's porn or video games. How pleasurable have you been living? Because a lot of us, we've just been up and up and up and up and up. And then also ask yourself this question, and this might feel like it's going to destroy a bit of your masculinity. How much pain and discomfort have you voluntarily chose to experience? So going to the gym is pretty nice, especially when you get higher reps as well. You feel the stretch, the burn. Sometimes I do a set and I'm literally like aching so badly like this. So that's a good level of pain. How about after the gym? Because there's a whole lot of guys who go to the gym and are quite active for that, and then just sit around and just go on their laptops. And I do this very often, and I have done for a very long time. I literally going to the gym was like the only productive thing I was doing, and then straight after that I just sit around watching YouTube, even watching porn, playing video games, scrolling on my phone. Try and see this yin and yang pattern right now. How much pleasure have you had in the last 6 months? And how much pain and discomfort have you actively chosen to take? Because if we're being honest, I think for most of us, it's probably something like this. Probably the pleasure that we've just naturally taken day to day. Just because that's, of course, what life is. It's normal to just go through your day and maybe go to the gym and then, spend some time watching YouTube videos, spend some time, or Instagram story, okay, let's see. You don't really think these things. But for you to experience pain voluntarily, you have to make a conscious decision to do something hard, and it needs to be painful enough that it is kind of like significant in your day. It's not something that, you're just like, oh yeah, I've experienced so much pain in that thing. Because after a while, of course, things get a bit easier. If you keep doing the same thing, let's say going to the gym, things get a bit easier and easier and easier. Just be honest, have you implemented something in the last couple of months, something new, some new habit that is actually extremely difficult for you? Because I'm gonna be honest, bro, up until just like yesterday, I didn't. It only just hit me a few days ago. I come to you and I tried to preach to you, okay, masculinity, yeah, hard work. And then I looked back to the last few months and I was like, man, I was living quite a comfortable life. I was still waking up early. I was still, doing work and stuff and going to the gym. But I started to slack on my diet a little bit. Usually my diet's literally very clean, just like meat and vegetables and like very quite like healthy things, not very pleasurable things. Usually I did a bunch of martial arts, but just up until recently I was doing none. I was literally just, traveling around and just doing 1 month here, 2 months there. So I never joined a martial arts gym. I realized that for the past 6 months, I didn't voluntarily choose to experience that much pain. I voluntarily chose to experience more pleasure. And what happens with this, which has happened multiple times in my life, maybe you could relate to this. You make those small daily choices, the easy way or the hard way, the pleasurable food or the purposeful food, pleasure or pain. And I will hold my hand up and tell you, I chose pleasure for so many decisions for the past 6 months that my pleasure just kept on going up and up and up and up and up and up and up. And just a couple of weeks ago, I felt felt like I was down here. I literally felt a little bit depressed. I was still having quite, still a decent amount because, I didn't go overboard with it. I wasn't taking drugs. I wasn't watching porn. I wasn't playing video games. But certainly from like my level of living, I started to push a lot of pleasure. And then I looked around, I was like, man, I'm not even happy with my life. And it's only been a short amount of time that I've been thinking about dopamine and pleasure and pain. But just for the last 2 weeks, I've been pursuing a lot more pain. I've been doing high intensity cardio, which is quite painful. I'm on the assault bike, that bike where you do this stuff. I'm doing that like 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. I'm running. I've been doing close to an hour of cardio per day now. A little bit more stretching and martial art classes, cold showers, like actually lasting them longer, and finally starting to get into ice baths. And I feel terrific. I feel so much better. There was a guy that I met in Thailand when I was there like 6 months ago. He was a pretty big guy and he was just covered in tattoos. Absolutely, he was a really like based guy. Like he used to talk a lot about like the world and how like, like conspiracy theories and everything. And I liked him. He literally covered in tattoos. And the first day I met him, we spoke about his tattoos because I was telling him like, oh yeah, like the only kind of tattoo I'd ever get, like I would never get like some small thing here and there. If I was ever gonna get a tattoo, I would go extreme and literally get it all the way up to here, all on the fingers and everything. And that's exactly what he had. So I started asking him questions. And when you take an interest in someone's like passion like that, like they start to like you. So he starts to like open up and tell me a bunch of things. And he told me something which was so interesting. He said the reason why he's gotten this many tattoos, like literally his entire body, he's one of those guys, his entire body apart from like this much of his face was covered in them. All of his back, all of his fronts, all arms, everything covered, right? Literally even bits of his forehead had tattoos on. He said the reason why is because he's had to sit down with the tattoo artist putting a needle into him for 150 hours. Think about that. This guy over, a couple of years has had to sit down and literally have tattoos for over 100. I think it's even getting closer to like 200 hours. And he said that the reason why he's done this is to balance out the pain and pleasure of his life. That he experienced a lot of pleasure and that he feels like this tattoo was the cost for that pleasure, that you must balance it out with pain. And I learned a lot from him, but I'll be honest, I didn't utilize it as best as I could have. I didn't know the science behind it. It's just like this guy's telling me something. I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds really interesting, bro. Oh yeah, let's go play video games after this, guys. Like, but I learned a lot from this mindset that pain and pleasure must be balanced. And so there's something that you can do which is incredibly powerful, but you might not want to do just because it can infiltrate on some of the joy of your day, which is to go through your day and just being aware of every decision you make. Is this a pleasurable decision, a decision that will give you pleasure, but then will lead to pain, which is a bad thing? Or is this a decision that experiences pain right now, but will lead to pleasure or happiness in the long run? Because once I understood this concept, it reminded me a lot about what I used to speak about 1 or 2 years ago about instant and delayed gratification. Instant gratification are the things that feel good right now, but they make your life worse in the long run. So that is the video games and porn. They feel really fun right now, but then if you keep doing those things every single day, your life does take like a different trajectory, doesn't it? And so it gets worse. A lot of guys don't want to admit this, but honestly, every single time you play video games, your life does get worse. It's only by a small amount, but then suddenly you look back and you've been playing video games for 10 years, messing up your mental health. And I totally understand because they are so fun. And I was literally a full-on gamer for like 15 years. Still to this day, I can't really play video games because of how much I enjoy them. I wouldn't say I have an addictive personality, but I can easily play 4 hours of any game that I like, no problem. Those activities that feel pleasurable right now, but then lead to pain later, you should really try your best to limit them, to make them more of like some kind of special thing that you do, not a habit. If I could give you any good tip today, make those pleasurable activities, those instant gratification activities, more like a treat, more like an event rather than a habit. Because if every day you're experiencing this crash, and remember Andrew Huberman said this, when your dopamine goes up, it must go down, but it does not return to the baseline, it goes below that, which means that you are trading, like literally and scientifically, you are trading the future version of yourselves happiness for your pleasure and a little like nice feeling whilst you play some games or you watch porn right now. When you watch porn, your dopamine skyrockets. Dopamine is like, this good feeling, this feeling of desire, this feeling of motivation. It skyrockets, but then it must come down. It has to come down, but it doesn't just stop at where it was before you watched porn. It goes below that. You feel worse. This is a sacrifice of your future self, and it's unacceptable to do that every single day because eventually you just keep, going through this pattern and going lower and lower and lower, and then finally your baseline is so low that you could be diagnosed with depression. And I think so many people are here. I really think the amount of people who are genuinely like genetically depressed is so small, but there's so many people who are like feeling depressed because their dopamine receptors, if that's like the scientific stuff, is so fried that they've just kept on doing this, this sacrifice tomorrow for today's pleasure. They watch porn, feel good good right now, but then feel even worse later. They play video games feeling nice, but then they feel worse. Imagine doing this for hours, every single day, every day, every day, every day, every day, every day. And then you're down here. Baseline dopamine is terrible. You don't even enjoy video games anymore. You literally don't even enjoy something that used to be the most fun thing for you. Porn doesn't even stimulate you like it does, and now you have to go and find like deeper and darker niches and categories of it to try and get any level of stimulation. You're hooked to these things, you're addicted to these things, but they don't even make you feel good anymore. In fact, nothing really makes you feel good anymore. Well, there is one thing that makes you feel good. There is one cure out of depression, you know, the depressed version of that so many people experience. There's one thing: go and do some hard stuff. That's what Mike Thurston told me in the podcast I just did with him. Go and do some extremely hard stuff. Go and do some painful things. If there's someone who's watching this who feels depressed, you know exactly what I tell him? I wouldn't tell him, oh, you know, it's so bad for you, man. Or like maybe go to the doctors and get some medication or do this. Bro, go and do something hard and painful right now, because scientifically we know that that pain will lead to a greater rise of happiness. Because you know what I just explained about pleasure then goes down to pain, but then it doesn't stay at the base level. It goes down every single time. It goes below where you started. Well, that's the beautiful thing about pain. If this is your baseline and then you experience pain through something like an ice bath, and then you're down here, and then it goes up again because you feel good and pleasurable afterwards, it doesn't just stop at the baseline again. It goes through it, and now your baseline has moved. So let's do it again. Boom, it's gone through it again. Let's boom. The cure out of just this modern day nihilism and sadness and hopelessness and just empty feeling that so many guys have. It's not more pleasure, because if it was, we'd all be happy. If it was, like, porn would be amazing, wouldn't it? But it's not. We know that. If it was, video games would have no criticism labeled to them. Drugs wouldn't have any downsides. If the cure was pleasure, we'd all be fine. But it's not. The cure is pain. And hopefully now that you understand this concept, you can actively go out there and seek pain, because I think it is, which is so like wholesome to think about. I think all we've needed all this time is education, because I'm trying my best to explain these sciencey things to you, but I've learned directly from the scientist who, you know, has evaluated these papers and explained them really well. And once you have the education, the knowledge of how to improve your life, especially from someone who's credible, you can go and put that into action. That's why I've made this video. I hope to pass on just a little bit of what I've learned from Dr. Andrew Huberman, because I think this genuinely is life-changing for so many men. You don't feel motivated because you've experienced too much pleasure, and I don't say that as an insult. I say that with hope, because we can reverse this. You may feel more motivated if you pursue less pleasure and more pain. And the way to do this is to think right here, right now. What is your weakness? What is something that you know, let's say, is physically painful for you? You specifically. If you asked me this question at any time, I would have always told you the exact same answer: cold. Cold for me is actually like genuinely painful. If you've watched a bunch of my videos, you know I've mentioned this even before I ever found out about ice baths and dopamine and stuff. I've subtly mentioned this in maybe 5 different videos over the last few years. I just mentioned it. It's like cold is literally so painful for me. That thing that you know is kind of like your weakness that other people maybe can handle fine, but for you it's literally just so painful that you usually try to avoid it. Perhaps that's something that you should chase today. We'll link Dr. Andrew Huberman's full podcast on dopamine below, and I'll also link the one about ice baths and cold. That's the one I learned a lot from. 2 absolutely gem-filled, like 2-hour-long podcasts, man. It's absolutely incredible that this kind of content is out there for free. They're linked in the description. Usually I'd end my videos by saying like, oh, you know, click on one more of my videos so we get more views, but I actually want you to go and watch his instead. I don't really have anything to sell you at the end of my videos. Pretty much everything I do is for free. There's a few products we have that you can't really see without going like a couple of weeks in our emails, and you have to like put your hand up and say that you're interested in buying the product. So I don't really have anything to sell you, but we've just set up the channel memberships, and that's linked below. Maybe we'll have it pop up as a card. It's kind of like a meme. You can just get some like emojis, and if you want to help the channel out a little bit and you also want like a feeling of importance and you just want like a little meme picture next to your name when you comment so everyone knows like, oh look, he's got the Adonis picture. If you want to look into that, the channel memberships link will be somewhere popping up right now. Do the hard work, especially when you don't feel like it. Mwah.